Look at any major corporation today, and you will likely find a public pledge to reach net zero or achieve sweeping environmental goals. Yet year after year, physical emissions remain static or increase. The commitments are made, but the real-world results simply fail to materialize. The root cause of this failure is structural. Organizations treat sustainability as a brand identity, a soft, aspirational marketing function designed to signal virtue. They do not treat it as a hard operational discipline. Setting an ambitious corporate goal is easy, but intent means nothing if an organization lacks the rigid operational thresholds required to govern how decisions are actually made on the ground. Without those thresholds, companies default to the path of least resistance. They make public commitments without allocating the budget. They rely on perpetual mitigation instead of redesigning flawed systems. The result is a cycle of delayed action that amounts to functional greenwashing. True, competent sustainability practice is entirely behavioral. It is never declarative. You prove it through documented actions and calculated trade-offs, not through stated values. Solving this crisis requires stripping away the narrative entirely. We have to transition corporate practice out of public relations and into mathematically verifiable impact. That transition relies on two distinct, non-negotiable components working in tandem. First, an enforcement architecture, a governance structure giving the practitioner authority to mandate changes and refuse false claims. Second, a mathematical pipeline. This engine operates across 5 phases to convert raw operations into verified commercial assets. These two systems rely on each other completely. Without the governance architecture, corporate data is easily manipulated by executives. Without the mathematical pipeline, the architecture has no proof. We have to build both. We build the governance rules using the GPM standard, outlined here in the Sustainability and Practice text. This is the definitive rulebook for establishing professional boundaries inside a corporate environment. The cornerstone of this standard is the decision rights hierarchy. It defines exactly who holds authority when a company makes a choice that impacts its sustainability goals. In a mature organization, no material sustainability decision can proceed without the explicit sign-off of the designated practitioner. They act as the absolute checkpoint. Override authority does exist at the executive level, but it is heavily restricted. The C-suite can only bypass the practitioner if they provide a written, evidence-based justification addressing the specific concerns raised. To enforce this hierarchy, the standard relies on a fail-safe system known as mandatory escalation protocols. These protocols are triggered automatically under specific conditions. For example, if a company makes a public climate commitment but fails to allocate the necessary budget or operational support, the practitioner is required to escalate the issue immediately. If executive leadership ignores or dismisses these escalations, the practitioner is not allowed to simply accept the decision. They have a strict professional duty to bypass the C-suite and trigger board-level intervention. Handing someone the title of sustainability practitioner without granting them veto power over unverified claims renders the role entirely performative. Without that authority, the organization's entire ESG strategy is invalid. Decision rights mean little if the decisions themselves are subjective. To remove that subjectivity, practitioners evaluate every project using a rigid standard, the regenerative sufficiency test. The first hurdle in this test is categorization. The practitioner must determine if a proposed corporate intervention actually increases system capacity, making it regenerative, or if it merely reduces harm, making it mitigative. Mitigative interventions are strictly regulated. They are only permitted if a regenerative alternative is proven to be technically unfeasible. If a regenerative option exists, but leadership chooses the mitigative route simply because it is cheaper or politically convenient, the practitioner must intervene. This triggers an action known as professional refusal. The practitioner must formally refuse to endorse the project, blocking it from being categorized as sustainable practice. Professional refusal functions as a mandatory compliance control mechanism built directly into the practitioner's role. The moment an organization requires its practitioner to absorb ethical risk in order to protect corporate reputation, its sustainability claims become officially void. Once that governance architecture is locked in place, the challenge shifts to execution. How does a practitioner actually measure these impacts across the sprawling, chaotic reality of a global supply chain? They use the P5 framework. This diagram serves as the universal ruler, standardizing complex corporate operations into a single, cohesive geometry. The framework relies on 3 vertical domains: people, planet, and prosperity. These track the external footprint, measuring exactly how a company impacts the world around it. Those external domains are then intersected by 2 horizontal lenses: process and product. These track how the organization internally creates value and delivers its work. This matrix design eliminates vague reporting. It forces every corporate action, no matter how small, into a specific, measurable coordinate on the grid. To process all of those coordinates, we use the Think Plus Sustainability Integration Model, or SIM. This is a 5-phase, 25-workbook data pipeline designed specifically to execute the P5 framework. Phase 1 establishes the internal governance and personnel standards we just covered. So we move directly to Phase 2, scoping the operational boundary. Here, the system runs a dual materiality assessment, mapped out in Workbook 10. It strictly filters out irrelevant data. This ensures resources are only deployed to measure critical, localized site diagnostics, using Workbook 11. If an issue isn't material, it doesn't enter the pipeline. The prioritized data then moves into Phase 3, technical accounting and calculation. This is the engine room of the entire system. This phase is purely mathematical. It relies exclusively on raw, physical proof, like the actual utility bills and energy logs collected in Workbook 15. There is no room for estimates here. Those raw logs are processed through the Green Skills Gateway in Workbook 13. This is a conversion algorithm that translates physical plant data into highly defensible Scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions, populating a live corporate dashboard. This mathematical conversion acts as an immutable shield. By replacing broad assumptions with error-free, auditable data trails, the organization secures its physical baseline. Once the baseline is secured in the engine room, the verified data is exported into Phase 4, compliance and disclosure. The raw calculations are rigorously tested against national and international trade standards, like the MITI Readiness Compass and ISSB regulations. This structures the data into a formal legal disclosure, heavily insulating the company against greenwashing litigation. Finally, the fully compliant data stream enters the terminal node, Phase 5, commercialization and canopy architecture. The SIM pipeline uses this verified, heavily structured data to design resilient business venture blueprints that actively monetize the gaps in the sustainability market. The system takes the raw, physical friction of corporate operations and processes it into compliant, verifiable commercial capital. But none of this works in isolation. This highly engineered data pipeline is completely useless if the practitioner operating it does not possess the structural authority to enforce its findings. The mathematical pipeline must be permanently encased within the governance architecture. The math proves the work, but the practitioner's authority protects the math. Sustainability is a rigorous discipline of exact measurements and hard professional boundaries. Accepting anything less constitutes an abdication of professional duty.